welcome to Tech for Granted. This is our second episode. Thanks for coming back, and I hope you enjoy.
Yeah, so the Stack Overflow's annual developer survey the results are out, and it's the largest and most comprehensive survey of people who code around the world. So this year they had about 90,000 respondents, and some very interesting findings have been revealed. So firstly, Python is cementing its position as the darling of programming languages. What do you guys think about that?
That's unquestionable. It's a goddamn beautiful language. See, the way it's written, it's smooth, it's slick, it's powerful.
Yeah.
Can do a lot of things. But I'm still pro JavaScript.
Yeah.
I JavaScript.
Yeah, but unfortunately, JavaScript is way down the list. It's actually in 11th place, with only 66.8% rating it as the most loved language. Rust is actually the most loved language. And those are the same standings it had last year. What do you guys think?
For me, I'd say personally I'm a fan of Python too. Like Victor said.
Because that's all you know.
Shit.
Shots fired up here. Shots fired.
But I love it. I love it because of its utility. Okay, I'm biased to it because of my background in finance. So I like its utility when it comes to handling a lot of data and analyzing it, especially when it comes to things like if you're using things like TensorFlow and you want to like predict stock market data or stuff like that. It's really handy. And if you're really passionate about data science, Python is also a good place to start. If you like, you can also use R, but most guys prefer Python. Yeah. What else? Yeah. And also I like the frameworks. Yeah.
I mean, Python is up there because of the data revolution that's sort of going on. You know, there's all this data science, data everything nowadays has data in front of it. And Python has proven as a capable language to use in that regard, in the analyzing of data science. And basically, it's very good in terms of algorithms and data structures. And I think that's why it's trending because of with the hype and everything.
Yeah.
I think that I've never used Rust before, but considering JavaScript, I think I'd wish it loved me more. And I loved it as well. But I think JavaScript is really powerful. But at the same time, in terms of like where I'm going, in the direction I'm going, I think Python as well works for me because of the data aspect and how you can manipulate data using Python. Yeah.
It's also because of its ease in understanding. I think it has the easiest learning curve of all programming languages. True. And as such, a lot of developer beginner levels are adopting it. Actually, I believe in some campuses have started taking it up as their primary language for teaching students in computer science. And you see, like, all these factors put together, they just make it very popular. And I think it was last year's survey. It showed like the number of developers in the world is doubling annually. So if you couple the number of beginner developers having doubled over the year, the previous year, plus most of them, maybe not all, but most of them preferring to go with Python as their preferred language because of their learning curve, then of course it's understandable why it has taken the first spot in such a landslide.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting findings is that developers are getting younger. Over half of this year's respondents had already written a line of code by their 16th birthday, though that figure is significantly higher in some regions, lower in others, and it's definitely heavy with more men starting earlier than women. 8.7% say they were under 10.
When they started?
When they wrote the first line of code.
Yes. With that said, 45% of respondents have less than 10 years of coding experience. Only 4.7% have over 20 years. What do you guys think about that? I mean, I think it's... What exactly is do you guys recall your first line of code? I think mine was Hello World.
Everyone.
Everyone's was Hello World. Yeah. Mine was in Java. It was dreadful. But yeah, good times.
Mine was in Java too, actually. My first experience writing the first line of code was in campus. So we had a unit. We were using Java. And as Kenyan campuses go, imagine learning programming on a blackboard, on a whiteboard.
And an exam paper that you literally given a white space and you write hello world using
exactly. And the exam is a piece of paper, so you have to write your code on a piece of paper and submit it for the teacher to mark. So it was really dreadful.
It's very
dreadful. So I think actually when it comes to learning code, the circumstances in which you learn are also a very big factor, because the level of difficulty, because learning code isn't necessary. It's not hard, but it's also not the easiest thing you can do. It's quite challenging. And if you have like if the learning curve is extremely hard, and for reasons that are not necessarily related to the language itself, or trying to understand the syntax and stuff like that, they are basically more what I would call either environmental reasons. It can really be demoralizing to some point, because after that I don't think I touched code again, because before I started the class, I even bought one of these huge textbooks on Java, because I knew already we were going to start learn using Java, and so I was very disappointed on my first class. So I think it killed that spark I had for a while. But then later on, as I started doing other things, the spark got reignited there. And the advantages, I'd say, from my point of view of using Python is because, like Victor said, it's the syntax is really easy to learn. It's quite fast to pick up. So it's actually, it gives you a confidence boost when you're learning. And from that you can realize, oh, I can do this. If I can learn this, it's not as hard as the other languages. You'll have the confidence to go ahead and pick up other languages. You'll have that what do you call it, tenacity and grit, endurance. Yes, exactly, to stick through it when you're learning even a bit harder languages that are a bit harder, because it'd be like, at least from my point of view, if you can do this in this other language, I'm sure as hell I can do this in this other language, even if it's a bit challenging and difficult.
Just even in the point of learning abilities, the most common physical disability, according to the Stack Overflow developer survey, is blindness, with 1.5% citing that. So that's about 20,000 respondents saying that they have some form of mental disorder. I think it's an eye-opener to the epidemic that is mental health. Do you guys experience any blockers or burnout, or just days when you don't want to code? So maybe your learning ability or struggle is not necessarily blindness or something physical, but just anxiety or maybe depression. Is that something that any of you have experienced? Personally, for me, it's imposter syndrome, right? Just that feeling like, oh my God, there's so much to learn. There's so much I still need to know. The minute that you've picked up something, there's something else to pick up, and that it's always updating, like when we were learning how to code, we were learning with Django 1. I don't know if any of you guys have tried coding again with Django 2.1, and you're just like, oh my God.
Yeah, it's so easy.
What? Is this for me?
Yeah.
What are your views?
Personally, for me, first of all, let me apologize to the listeners. My first line of code was Ruby, MQL4, MQL5, then Java, in that order. So, but Java is the first language that I actually learned, like sit down, learn this thing. So, personally, it's my head gets heavy, very, very heavy, to the point where I just have to stand, go take a breath, and try to like lighten up when I'm facing a bug that has been going for too long. But when I'm writing code and I'm feeling it flowing and I'm not like facing any struggles, I can write for hours and just be okay. The other issue I was telling Eugene this morning, it's the staring into the abyss. This when you find yourself you're looking at code for a very long time, but when you just like take a step back and ask yourself, what have I done for the last 3 hours? You realize you've just been going back and forth different files, reading the code, writing one line, indenting, then going back and forth, but you've not actually done anything. And these are some of the issues that I don't know. Maybe it would take a full podcast episode to discuss how you can sort of go around solving these problems of like imposter syndromes and staring into the abyss and all of these situations.
I think my biggest problem is just that starting point where you don't even have an idea of whatever you're developing is going to look like. But for me, I understand there has to be a process where you just like just you have to get angry, or you have to take that walk, or you have to, close your laptop for a while and meditate about what you've written so that you get a clear vision of what you want to create or see on your laptop. So I think for me, I've just accepted that it's going to be hard either way. So I have to go through the process in order to just see the other side.
And actually, Eugene, there's something you said initially about programming being simple. And I think I disagree a little bit. Not completely. Like Python is easy. Let's be honest, beginner level. Yeah. But the thing that makes them seem easy rather is the fact that nowadays people learn it on demand. Like you want to learn how to build a website. There's React. There's React, there's Django, there's all of these things, and the frameworks has done all the hard stuff for you behind the scenes, and all you have to do is like call a method, call a function, and this thing happens like magic. You see, when you look at it from that perspective, it's quite easy to learn. And the reason like there's like 4% senseis in programming is because to get to that other extreme level, it's not easy. It's really not easy. You have to understand the mechanics that go behind it. You have to understand how this language communicates with the computer. What's the name is lost on me. Like how it communicates with the machine on a fundamental level to even compute these things so that they can give you the desired output. So when you decide, I think the ease of programming, how easy it is to learn, depends on what you are learning. If you're learning OS development, for instance, it's not going to be easy. If you're learning web development, it might be easy. Yeah. Back-end is harder than front-end, depending on your creative aptitude, I think. You see, so it's a very... It has too many factors going for it. The Javas, and the C sharps and everything.
Also, back to what Melissa said about mental health, I normally think about how guys with something like either bipolar syndrome or with diagnosed levels of depression or anxiety normally cope with learning programming, because on the first initially it's quite challenging and there's a steep learning curve to go through. And I remember back when you were learning to code, we used to have it was a bit challenging for a good number of us, because like Melissa said, there's that feeling of imposter syndrome. So the way people with like seriously diagnosed mental health issues cope with such pressure is actually something of interest to me, because it's something that actually comes to my mind. So I don't know. I don't know if there's a study done on that. Yeah,
it's not a matter of studies, but okay, there has to be a study. But I think each one of us. Let me not speak for others, but for me, I can say that. For me, wanting to learn how to code and going through that process actually helped me with my depression. It made me more confident. It brought me out of a funk that I was in. Probably I was definitely feeling like professionally I had to amplify what I already had. And learning how to code gave me so much more confidence that when I looked back at before I started coding, I'm actually proud of the growth. Coding actually helps you grow as a person mentally, because there's this part of the brain that you use every other day to be thinking. I think Victor once said that he has a problem in the middle of the night. He hasn't solved the problem, but then he wakes up and then he's like, oh, I've realized, as in that's stimulation of the brain happens. And I don't know. And for those who usually just drop out in the middle, maybe they didn't get the concepts or, there's also those two aspects I can say. There's one who will go through the process and actually come out of it stronger. And there's someone who'll give up along the way.
So you're saying like your why matters.
your why always matters. When you're doing anything difficult,
Yeah,
your why
why
matters.
matters.
If you're studying a medical degree and your why is not strong enough, I mean, even your parents forcing you to do it, that's a pretty strong why. You have to have a why when you're doing something difficult. And programming, like we said, if you want to achieve the depths of the sensei, you have to have a why.
Yep.
And a very good one at that.
Because along the way you just your energy depletes. Your projects are not working and you're wondering why I've been doing this for so long and yet it's still not going as I wanted. But going through that process, it does something to your spirit, your capabilities, and maybe, I don't know, for me my confidence completely rose. And I think that right now I feel like not necessarily superwoman, but I can go through, just if I set my mind to it, I can actually accomplish it. Just going through the process day by day by day, not at I'm looking at the last day and I haven't gone through this other period of time, Yeah.
Yeah, and speaking of productivity, so when the respondents were asked what their greatest challenges to productivity are, most of the responses said a distracting work environment and meetings prevent them from being productive. So 41.8% said a distracting work environment is a hindrance. 36% said meetings. 36% said being tasked with non-development work. Others include not enough people for the workload, a lack of support from management, inadequate access to necessary tools, toxic work environment, the time spent commuting. I think that's something that a lot of developers in Nairobi and maybe in Africa go through. Others said non-work commitments, so like parenting, schoolwork, hobbies. I think that's something we experienced when we were learning how to code. In the same class that we were in, there are a lot of people who are married, who are parents, who had other commitments. Some were seeking scholarships, so they had financial commitments. What do you guys think is your greatest hindrance to productivity? I think for me, it's just focusing, like that discipline, like trying to manage your time. You have 24 hours in a day. Maybe you spend 8 to 12 hours resting. So trying to like modularize how you spend your time. For me, I think I could be more productive in that sense.
For me, actually, my challenge is also similar to Melissa's. For me, it's like I don't want to say finding the time, but organizing myself in a way that I can optimize my day effectively so that I can get the most out of what I'm doing, even when it comes to programming. Because it's really, I find it's mentally intensive, and it also, because I feel like writing the code is actually one of the last steps, because there's a lot that goes in before you start writing the code. So actually also having an optimized process of planning out your entire work and how you'll execute it is also something that is really important. And I found that before, when I started programming and I didn't have a perfect system, not perfect, but a working system of doing that, my productivity levels were very low, because you'd find yourself doing tasks repetitively and they weren't really organized. It wasn't systematic. But once I adopted like a refined way of implementing my work, even from the ideation stage to the implementation stage, I found that my productivity really increased and I was able to accomplish more in a shorter time frame. Yeah.
For me, I think it's the same as you guys, but concentration. Like it's very easy to get distracted. Messages popping up, notifications. Speaking of which, you just turn those off. And actually the bigger question is like, do you guys have solutions for the troubles that you face? Michelle, like, what's your problem? Do you have a solution for?
Yeah, my problem is commuting. I'd rather work from home, but then home is also a distraction. So for me, working from I've been trying this week. I've actually worked productively from home because I had deadlines to meet and I just had to work, period. So just the same thing that you guys have said, that just setting aside time to actually sit down and focus on what you're supposed to do. I think that's my biggest challenge, and I'm still progressively working on it so that I don't switch tabs to the movie section or the YouTube section as I'm working. Because it's human nature to not, be fully productive. But as you learn, I think it's all in the mind. Just, I don't know. I don't have a solution for that, really.
I was thinking about the switching to the movie tabs this morning, actually, on my commute. Yesterday, I have this project that I'm currently working on, and it has a deadline of tomorrow. But I was after I finished building a section of it, I just felt tempted to watch a movie.
True.
And I was like, you know what, screw it, I'm gonna watch it. And so today's one, I was thinking to myself, like, is there a way you can find a way to like curb this situation? And I was thinking, like, what if you could just write a Chrome extension or whichever browser you use that before you move to that particular URL, like M4U free for me, they'd be like, are you sure you've finished doing all the things you're supposed to do? You know, like, it will sort of guilt you into rethinking your life choices. It's like a psychological test rather than stopping you. At the end of the day, you can just lie and keep going. But I don't know. It was just one of the solutions I was thinking of.
I think I'm still working on myself. It's a process.
There's something, I'm going back to what Victor said, the thing about concentration. Where you said you finished a particular task, then you want to
Reward yourself.
I think probably a solution could be like practicing like a variation of the Pomodoro technique. You work for an X amount of time, then you break, and because I feel like we are,
the breaks though are very short.
No, so maybe like tweak it,
to your
because we are reward driven eventually. So when it gets to a point where you are saturated, I feel personally you let's say you've worked for an hour or 2 hours, you can give yourself like 15 to 20 minutes, either if you want to watch something or like unwind. Do it, maybe watch a short clip or something of that sort of take a break or walk or like get some fresh air.
Okay, never
and
come
do
back.
That. And that helps. But there's also this thing you can try. There's this thing called flow. So studies have shown that for people who are able to tap this thing called flow state, if you're able to tap into flow state for about 2 or 3 days, you're able to produce more than what a regular person does after a week of working. So and the way guys do that is actually going into a place where you mute everything out. So like you've said, turning off notifications and whatnot. So in a day, someone gives themselves like 3 to 5 hours where they've just muted everything out. And if this is something that you're really dedicated towards you'll work, and then you'll get to that point when you're saturated. It will be like a high. So you won't actually, when you're in that state, it's like a heightened state. So that aspect of time doesn't really, you don't feel it.
Felt like someone who's on Adderall.
Exactly, yeah. So it's like your outside time. But then when you're saturated, you'll just get out of that state. And then I think that's the level whereby you'll even know when you're saturated. So that's the point whereby you can decide to take a break or do something. So that's something that could work for some people there.
One thing, the final thing that I found to be a very big distraction. It's not so of a distraction. Okay, this is very programmer specific, but that's the topic anyway. It's programming is a very step-by-step sort of a process. You have to work, like you have to begin with your research, you gather your resources, you like if you're doing a full stack project, for instance, you have to like find the UI, think about what you want to do. And I was actually showing Eugene this morning a tool that I found very recently called Milanote, and basically it allows you to like have a system that flows from one end to the other very seamlessly. So that if you're building a full stack application, you can take like the first 2 hours of your day creating that flow, and when you start coding, your mind will not have to make the links. The links have already been well written down and organized somewhere. So like all you're doing is coding, like I'm on the level where I'm supposed to be designing the UI. You design the UI. You're not thinking about what's supposed to be in here. You already know what's in there because you've already pre-designed this. And that actually helps with the reducing sort of increasing your productivity and reducing the strain that you have on your brain. Because if you don't have it, you're like thinking like, when I send this to the backend, I expect this response comes with this, and then you're sort of trying to juggle too much. And it can't work basically. So like finding a way to organize your thoughts outside your head helps in terms of productivity. That's something that I'm actually working on it. I don't know. I'll tell you in the next episode how it's going.
Oh yeah, this week what worked for me, during the day you have to communicate with people, so it's unavoidable to be on your phone or just to be in communicate, to have those channels where you have to speak to other people. And in terms of switching off, I think this week I've been waking up pretty early, and maybe that's between 6 a.m. and 9 a.m. I'm not even around my phone. And then I think maybe this week I'll start working at night, because there's nothing happening at night, and I feel like I won't be missing out on maybe a conversation that was happening that I'm supposed to be part of. And yeah, I think that's what's worked for me. Making sure I'm very productive in the very early hours of the morning, and maybe in the evening. That's when I usually just sit down and work on what I'm supposed to do completely.
These mosquitoes won't let me work at night though.
Yeah, so I like what you said, Michelle. At the end of the day, developers are lifelong learners, right? So another interesting finding from the survey is that worldwide, at least out of the 90,000 respondents, 75% of professional developer respondents have the equivalent of a bachelor's degree or higher, consistent with what they found in previous years. So 45% have a bachelor's degree, 22% have a master's degree, and only 2.8% have a doctoral degree. The rest, 10%, completed their secondary school education. The other 12% had some college study without earning a degree, and 0.6% never had any formal education. What do you guys think? Because coding, programming, the life of a developer, you're constantly learning online, you're taking tutorials. Another interesting finding was that 85% of the respondents taught themselves a new language, framework, or tool without taking a formal course. 60% took an online course in programming or software development. 41% contributed to open source software. The other respondents received on-the-job training in software development. 26% participated in a hackathon. 25% participated in online coding competitions. 18.7% have taken part-time courses. 15% have participated in a full-time developer training program or bootcamp. And lastly, 15% have completed an industry certification program. So, of course, there are many ways of learning, even outside of coding, whether you're in the healthcare sector, the creative sector. Learning how to do what you do, it's not just about completing a formal certification or a degree, but at the same time, you'll find that even in this survey, over 50% have a bachelor's degree and a master's degree. They all range from computer science to economics to maths, psychology, statistics, even liberal arts like English literature. What's your view on learning how to learn, especially in Africa?
This one, I'm going to say something weird. Okay, I can't found it. I can't put it on like strong stone foundation because I've never set foot in a campus. But from what I've heard and what I've experienced from people who have gone to campuses to learn CS in Kenya specifically, is that it's close to pointless. Like if you're being given an exam to write code on a piece of paper, how are you supposed to achieve any sort of experience, or even like how would you even learn? You need to like experience these things on a computer and get feedback, and most importantly, get autocomplete. You don't need to write all these full words, Bana. It's 2019. But so in terms of, it depends on where you are and the level of like programming you want to achieve. If you want to become an engineer, for instance, a software engineer, a data engineer, this requires fundamental understanding of programming concepts. So you'll find someone that was attended maybe MIT, for instance, would be better suited for these things because they have been taught the fundamentals, how these things work under the hood. But if you want to learn web development, even data science, or these other courses, I really don't think school is necessary, to be honest. yes, it may be necessary because of employment and they require it as one of the conditions, which actually companies are beginning to turn away from. Not all, some, and I think they might actually turn back to because of the surge of developers in the industry. That's just a theory, I don't know. But in terms of online is more than enough, to be honest. If you're not interested in understanding how it actually works, but just implementation or level, online is even much more better because they'll give you real life hands-on experience very fast. A boot camp is even much better in that case, a good one, because they'll take you through what's needed for the industry. I see people smiling and I stated a boot camp. So yeah, there's some boot camps you can go to, and bro, just don't. What about other people?
For me, I can say, especially here in Africa, the greatest downside I see when it comes to learning is the lack of research. Because, like you've said, most of learning in our Kenyan universities, at least most of the public ones, isn't really effective when it comes to something hands-on like programming. But you can complement the theory you get with external sources, so like courses on Udemy and another EDX, Coursera, like the Harvard courses or the MIT OpenCourseWare. But then the problem is I see with the local situation is there's little to no research when it comes to like pushing the boundaries of what we already know. So like in the campus, in our campuses, I don't know the number of campuses in Kenya that have extensive research, or whereby extensive research is being done by either doctorate students or either master's students, so that they can push the envelope on what we know. And I think through that we can achieve, we can come up with homegrown innovations in Africa instead of always copying or getting information from research that has been done in other countries. So I think through that you can also develop homegrown solutions to our problems.
Maybe to add on what Levi has said, I think that whatever you've learned in education, the way you'd use your code is not the same way that someone who studied economics will use their code. And that's the beauty of code. I think that how an economist would apply their code is not the same way that a financial guy would use their code. And that's, I think I was speaking to someone during the prep stage of our bootcamp, whatever, and he told me about something he wanted to do, because he had studied economics and statistics, and the way he approached how he would use code to actually do the projects that he wanted, I was like, I had never even thought about it. So that's the beauty of code. I think that even when you approach it as a doctor, whether you have your linguistics degree or you have your master's, code is just so diverse to me that, if I advance my education, I will definitely take code with me because there's a way I can use it. I don't know.
I actually came across a banker turned developer once with like 20 something years of experience in development, and the advice he gave me was that find a discipline and code around it. Yes. That's the way you can achieve most out of programming.
You've said it how I wanted to say it.
That is like if you're a banker, so you have finance experience and everything, and then you code around finance, you'll make like really, really cool stuff with programming, and you'll solve actual problems around because you have a deep understanding of both fields.
I think interestingly enough, you'll find that even in the recruitment space, so it's not just about maybe people in other industries learning how to code so they can make their work more efficient or automated. You'll find that even when companies are looking to recruit software engineers, they will say, okay, I want someone with JavaScript skills, Python, Django Flask, but they have to have worked in the fintech space. And I will not look at anyone else who's worked elsewhere. So it's also a pointer to now software developers to focus on a domain. I don't think it's advisable to just jump from freelance project to another. You're working in the education sector, then you're working in fintech, then you're doing a project for the healthcare sector. You'll find that even companies want to work with coders or programmers or engineers who have domain expertise.
Yep.
But moving to that, we usually have no choice over. It's race and ethnicity. So in the 90,000, or amongst the 90,000 respondents, 70% were of white or European descent. 12% were South Asian, 7.1% were Hispanic or Latina, 5.9% were East Asian, 4% were Middle Eastern, 3.6% were Black or African, 2.3% were multiracial, 1.3% were biracial or rather identified as, and 0.8% were Native American, Pacific Islander, or Indigenous Australian. So the guys who are giving the insights have said that we asked our respondents about their identities and see evidence that people of color continue to be underrepresented amongst developers, especially amongst professional developers. We see higher proportions of people of color in students than professional developers. We have seen incremental improvement in this area year over year. Like with gender representation, this gradual change is encouraging, but the overall participation levels indicate that there's a lot of work that needs to be done. So I think, just bringing it back to Africa, we sometimes identify as African, we are identified by whether we choose to or not our tribe, the urban areas like, you're from Nairobi, you're from Mombasa, you're from, Kisumu. But sometimes it's easy to forget that we are black. We know that, but it's not something that we are cognizant of every single day, because as African developers, you're operating in a space where majority of the people around you are black anyway. So I think sometimes there's that disconnect of the racial imbalance that there is in the software developer community. Do you guys have any thoughts to share as black developers? We are the 3.6%.
Really? That's 3.6% for black. That means it includes black people in America, black people in...
No, this is out of the respondents. So it's just out of 90 a representation. It's a sort of pointer that, we are not as many.
We are few.
So out of 90,000, it's actually 3,240. 3,000.
Oh, my point was on how sad it is, because if you put those people in their respective continents, Africans will drop to nothing.
Yeah.
But why will you guys say, what will you think is the cause of that low level of proliferation of software dev skills among Africans, especially on the continent?
It's because of how we are raised, honestly.
Yeah. And I also think that we are still hesitant to this new infrastructure that's going. I think that other continents, or those the 70% are white. Wow. So as in, they've accepted that this is the way they can use their systems to actually advance themselves. But over here, things are still so manual. If you go to a hospital, manual. If you go to just government parastatals, manual. So
what if someone will say that in Africa, something like software engineering and development is elitist in a way, because only people who come from a certain socioeconomic background, social cultural background, are exposed to it from a young age, or even are aware of it at a certain point in their lives where they can pick it up, either if it's changing careers or something of that sort. So if it's changing careers, you need to have the capability to live and support yourself as you undergo through that transition. So there's also a socioeconomic aspect to it.
Yeah, I read there was the guys who usually do research for now disaster management and stuff like that, and they advise the people in authority to actually take action on what they're supposed to do before this happens and this happens. But implementation in Africa, we keep on going the same cycles, and the solutions are being presented, but they're not being acted upon. So I don't know. I don't know. we don't see the bigger picture. That's why even in Africa, we can't see these multinational companies being created. Creativity among young people is limited. You have to go outside the country to actually succeed, for your projects to actually be seen, for you to actually be valued. When you get like a Nobel Peace Prize, that's when Kenyans will know about you. We don't appreciate the people who are here, and we don't support them, and yeah, so we don't have the capacity to actually be like as you've said, there's a huge number of students, but the number does not reflect in the professional level. We don't know how to use what we already have, and maybe it's not useful in the environments that we are in, and until there's a change in system.
Even in terms of the impact has not yet been felt. It has been felt, but only to the people like are in the relevant social settings, like Nairobians, like urban people. But if you go to the rural places, like they haven't felt the technological revolution yet. And if you are a parent and you've not even felt the impact of technology, are you more likely to like tell your kid you are going to be a doctor, or you're going to be an engineer, you're going to like study software engineering? But I feel in countries like advanced first world countries where they've sort of seen what technology is capable of, now it's officially, they put it on the same pedestal that they would put medicine, for instance. But you see, like for us, it's not yet there. So when like people are growing up and going through school and everything, it's not a consideration until you move out of your village and into an urban setting and into campus, and you feel like you have already 10 applications on your mobile phone and be like, wow, this is actually something that someone can do. So that's the only time it sort of rings in your head that this is a viable solution. So I think the only way it's time. Give it time. Let for instance connectivity of internet like flow. If Kenya, we are still one of, I think we are top 3 countries with best internet connectivity in Africa. And if you think about it, the internet connectivity is in Nairobi. Let's be honest, I've lived in Mombasa and the internet there is shit. So you can imagine what it's like in other places, like the rural places. So if we are up there in terms of countries that are very well connected to the internet, and the internet is still not good, so you can imagine trying to like drive people into software development, it's going to be hard.
But even if there's high connectivity, how are people using the internet?
Is it
to watch movies or to create?
Is there you can control? But the thing is, first of all, you have to give people the platform and give them show them what it can actually do, what it's capable of. And for that, connectivity first of all has to happen on a substantial enough scale, So until then, I think like we have to just power through as people who are from the urban settings in doing software development. I really don't think there's a way around that personally, unless you guys
I agree with Victor. Someone has to feel the impact of that connectivity beyond the normal blaze benefits you get from it. Whether it's watching a movie and whatnot, because that really isn't impactful.
So what is let's say for example that blaze. So how, even if you get that free thing, how I think we never see the back. I think the way systems, as I've read or spoken to people, the way systems usually work abroad is that you're actually explained to how this system will work, and then now it's up to you as a citizen to agree on whether this is the approach that us as a community will use to effect this change. But if you look at Kenya, how things happen is just that you wake up today, you have to take your Huduma number. Today you have to, or you won't get up. That's how. Imagine, Huduma number was apparently there. It was a proposal in Parliament since 2016, but right now, as you can see, guys are not educated on social affairs. Guys don't know how to use the information that they already have. Even for us young people, we have the resource, yes, which is maybe the gift of, coding, but you don't know the scope of, you can create there's people who've created multi-billion-dollar companies, but in Kenya, you create your company, you see a replica of it being done by maybe someone more prosperous, and you can't do anything about it because there's no laws, there's no, there's no systems in place to make sure that even if I create this product, I am going to succeed and sell it to the masses, and but systems in Kenya are so restrictive, and we're just not there yet. We are not there yet.
And I mean that the whole racial inclusion in the tech industry for minorities applies to gender. So you'll find that 90 out of the 90,000 respondents, 92% were men, 7.9% were women. So we have a long way to go.
A really long way to go.
I mean, I'm curious, as men, how do you think women can be more involved? Because I feel like for us female developers or people who identify as women, because you have transgender people who also identify as women, we always complain about access to finance, access to resources, the patriarchy. In your view as a man, what do you think can be done to include more women in the tech industry?
The first thing I'm actually thinking of is there are measures being taken right now, especially in places like Africa, where you have Girls for Code and things like Akira Chicks, to increase the level of female participation in like programming and maybe other STEM fields. So it's something that I've always I think of sometimes, like how will you push that envelope to get like a certain critical mass of females involved in the tech sector, because sometimes to me it seems like whatever is being done is not really working. I don't know why. Maybe it's because the time lapse is small, so maybe we need like a longer time period before you can hit that critical mass. But I also think probably there's more that can be done, because 7% is very little, is so little, it's so tiny. So for that,
to be honest, I think speaking from a Kenyan perspective, when we have lawmakers, policymakers who they don't see the agenda of, like the last law that they passed, the last bill that they proposed was about now girls lowering the age of consent, right? You see, those are issues. No, I'm not trying to trigger anyone.
They're not
by the
important.
Way. Yeah, they're not important. I don't know. Even in our education system, you'll find that girls are passing more than boys. But then if you look at our culture, the way it's set up, it's not conducive for young women to actually thrive. Our systems are not in place to allow young girls to thrive. We have girls who are experiencing things like lack of sanitary pads, so that, poverty, things like those, as well as, this is the girl child I'm speaking about, so don't bring boys that boys also have to learn. So this is the girl child who I'm speaking about. So I think culture, policy, and just, recently, as I've said in the previous episode, 2019 has a different energy, and people are coming out of their shells. And even these debates which are happening on social media, where young women actually have to defend themselves, so because men are not seeing the point of young women thriving in situations, and even if they thrive, it's because of another man. As in men need to check themselves, to be honest.
I feel like,
even as you can see in Africa, most the people who are in power or who hold the keys to these institutions, and they're all men. You'll rarely find women. So women also have to be in those. Men have to not allow women, but not even create positions. But we all need to be in a position where we can sit down and bring each other into the table, because as we speak right now, it's only men who are making decisions for women. And that's my opinion for men.
This is a very touchy subject, but I think in Kenya specifically, in Nairobi, I can't speak for the rest of the counties, I'm realizing that supporting women in tech is becoming fashion rather than action. See, like you meet people who are all about, oh yeah, I'm looking for female developers. And then you go, next time you come again and like, wow, you're a female developer. I'm looking for female developers. Like I was here last time and you say the same goddamn thing. Where is your action? It's like you putting yourself out there as someone who's hiring female developers, promoting female developers. It's becoming more of fashion rather than action. And I feel like that's what needs to change. If you like just dig into the internet right now and look for developer jobs, I'm pretty sure of 1 in every 3 you see being, I don't know if generous or mean, they'll be like, we're looking for female developers, specifically female developers. But if you apply the female developer, they're just going to be like, you realize it's again the same fashion thing. So what people need to do is put actions behind their words. You don't just have to keep saying you're looking for female developers, you're empowering female people. Yes, they're words, but they mean nothing until people start actualizing. And it doesn't matter who is saying them. It doesn't matter if you're a man or if you're a woman. What we need is action. It's no longer just have to be about. And if this is the same situation across the entire world that is, then you can see why that ratio is like that. Like this was just a test case from what I've observed personally in Nairobi. So if it's the same case, then you can see why it's 7%. So I think it just have to shift from just being a fashion to something that people can actually put action behind. That's me.
If I may ask also, to what extent do you guys think like systemic issues really affect this? Because you can say we have like a women in tech program here, but the people who can access these programs are also limited because of the nature of the systems that are in place in the country.
I think I've already explained that the system needs to support
I think when it comes to even feminist theory, there's a concept of intersectionality. So you'll find that, yes, you are a woman, but that manifests in many different ways. There's race, there's your gender that you identify as, and then there's your class background. So those are very many different issues. I'd love to discuss that in a very different setting or podcast, but I think the Stack Overflow Developer Survey has revealed a lot. I hope you listeners have learned a lot. You can read more about it. I'd like to wrap up that sort of segment by a tweet by Ali Spittle. So she's a software engineer, and she tweeted this. So she said, reminder, there's a world out there outside of programming, right? You are still valid if your job is not coding. You don't have to write code all the time. You don't have to be a coder for your whole career. Also, I don't write code full time anymore, and I haven't for 2+ years. As a follow-up, even if you don't code as your full-time job, it's still a helpful skill to know. It helps to add context for another role, and you can probably automate parts of your job. You can do other work and still be successful and fulfilled.
Wise words.
Yeah.
So this week, Jumia, Africa's largest e-commerce platform, IPO'd on the New York Stock Exchange. So they were looking to raise $200 million from the IPO. And as of yesterday, their share price was up by 75% from the listing price. So what do you guys think about it?
First of all, has anyone ever used Jumia?
Yeah.
You've used it? How is it?
I've used it. I've used it how many times? About twice. So on both times, on one occasion, I paid after delivery. On the other occasion, I paid before delivery. So for me personally, I can say I got what I ordered. I was fortunate enough. So I've never received anything that was malfunctioning or wasn't what I ordered. So I also used, there was one, they had before Jumia Marketplace, there was another company that was still owned by AIG, that is the parent company of Jumia, Africa Internet Group. It was called Kamo. Yeah, I also used that. It was around 2015.
Yeah, I remember Kamo.
Yeah. And I also got what I ordered. The process was, there was the only challenge I encountered back then was I had paid, but I had paid before delivery, but when going to pick up my package from the collection point, the payment hadn't been confirmed. So that was the only issue, but they resolved it in about 15 minutes. But generally, my experience has been okay. Yeah.
I think for me, what's interesting is, so they were trying to raise $216 million, but up to date, they've made a loss of over $1 billion.
Yeah.
So I'm confused. I'm very confused.
For me personally, on that, I'd say the greatest challenge Jumia faced, and I think something that has contributed to their extreme costs, will be the logistics aspect.
Yeah.
So setting up the network of warehouses and logistics to deliver these goods across the various locations of their customers has been very costly. Yeah. So that would be one main cost driver. And also they were the first, so penetrating a market, especially like Africa, that doesn't have the exactly established systems, so increases the cost of doing that. So, but like I've seen, the surge in share price shows that investors have faith in it. So I don't know whether they're conflating it to Amazon, because it's almost close to the same thing. So because you see guys calling Jumia the Amazon of Africa, so I don't know whether it's hype or whether it's just it's yeah. What do you guys think
they
about?
Have pretty well set up infrastructure for Amazon to like buy them off and like keep their business going. I don't know. It's a theory someone once floated. Like the reason they are tolerating such big losses is because their main objective is not to succeed. It's
Acquisition.
Be acquired.
To be bought,
By something like Amazon. So, for instance, like now with the IPO and the raising of funds, the funds are not to streamline their business. No, they're to expand it so that now they have a big enough network that would look lucrative to, let's say, Amazon. So it no longer be called the Amazon of Africa. It will actually be Amazon in Africa.
So I think just to bring a different perspective, I also there's this business, I don't know if it's a business policy or a business strategy, where you are allowing yourself to incur losses as long as you're gaining market share, such that maybe let's say in 10 years time, in Africa, no one will be doing any online shopping or anything if they are not on Jumia. So I think right now they are at a point where they are just expanding and building infrastructure to make sure that they gain market share. And Africa, I think, is one of the largest markets in the world. So having a market share in one of the largest markets in the world is worth going for. It's worth incurring losses as long as you're gaining this market share. So I think it could be a business strategy where they say, let us just gain market share. I think it's something even Amazon did. They incurred losses for a really long time, but all this time they were gaining market share, and you can see right now the market share that they gained is really paying off. So maybe it could be a business strategy, and that's why investors are not worried.
But for Amazon, I'd say the losses were more or less intentional, because if
they scaled,
they scaled fast, but they had the ability to make a profit, but they opted to scale fast. Because like if you see, even for the way when they launched their Prime service, initially it was $7, and they normally made a loss of around $2, because fulfilling the Prime service used to cost $9. But eventually, after they got people on board, they charged $11 for it. So 95% of people who were previous users of Prime still remained on Prime. So you see, they acquired that. But you see, Amazon comes with a lot of efficiencies. You will always get what you ordered for. You're guaranteed to get the best price. There's what is it called? The return after in case you get something that isn't what you ordered, you're guaranteed to get a replacement. So
return policy.
So the return policy always works. I'm not saying Jumia is bad, but we've seen complaints of people in social media saying they either bought something that doesn't work, or they got something that wasn't what they ordered, and the process of rectifying that, or when someone tries to follow the laid out channels in the return policy, they get frustrated. They end up giving up. So I think that could be a problem. Maybe as Africans we are not exactly that I would say, specific or adamant about service. I'm not sure. I can't speak for everyone, but but personally, I will be. So maybe that is something we should also consider. Yeah.
But there's a lot of optimism because just turning it back to the African consumer, a lot of articles are saying that there's a projected GDP growth for the continent, 6% for 2019. By 2050, Nigeria is going to be the third most populated country. 59% of Africans expect to live in urban areas by 2050. So, I mean, I think if you look at it in the long term, they're really laying their foundations, and that's obviously a good thing. I think good service, efficient delivery for African consumers and non-African consumers overall is always a good thing. And also giving, because I think currently they have 81,000 retailers. So just giving entrepreneurs that space to sell their products, to sell their service is also a good thing, right?
Yeah. Then I'd also like to mention this question of, is Jumia a startup in Africa versus African startup thing? Because from what I can see, Jumia operates in 14 countries in Africa, but it's incorporated in Germany, headquartered in Dubai, and its tech team is in Portugal, and it's listed in New York.
And
I think we have to Africa. You don't even need to look further.
And most of the management team is not African. Yeah. So what are your thoughts on that?
I don't know if you can call it a problem. It is. It is.
No, I wanted to start with that point, but continue.
It is a problem, but when you look at it, in a way, the way Africa is structured, it's the only way for a startup to scale. You know, you have to
Only way?
The best way. Pardon.
The most efficient.
The most efficient, yeah. There's so many ways, but it's the most efficient in that having that foreign aspect gives the people with the money, like the New York stock, for instance, it's like
that's where the money is.
That's where the money is. So like having that foreign aspect of control, it gives where the money is. That's the people who control the money, confidence in the startup. But if you have a startup run by Jogona Kimani, Otieno, and Danyang, and you try to take it to NSC, like, hey, bro, you're going to face problems. So,
but another thing you also think is the aspect of incentives, because you get very few African countries create environments that incentivize startups to grow locally, because like the aspect of being headquartered in Dubai, I would say it's something to do with taxation, because the corporate tax levels in Dubai are almost nil. They're very little as compared to African countries. So I think it's something we mentioned before in an episode we had way back, that aspect of having a sort of regulatory sandbox that really makes things, that really draws innovators to making them set up their startups in Africa, even making them making the African countries in which they operate like their headquarters or their domicile. So that could probably help from my point of view.
Yeah, it's actually quite sad, honestly, the way like the government doesn't favor growth of companies. You look at, like, for instance, SportPesa. That company was thriving. It was promoting local businesses, like it was sponsoring too many businesses, too many like startups, football clubs and everything. And then the government goes ahead and taxes these guys like crazy. Like, how do you expect businesses to thrive if that's the sort of what's the word, the front that you're presenting out there to like other people that may wish to develop their business? Like I may grow initially with this level of taxation, but I get to a certain point, it's like, oh, there's money over here, and tax inapandishwa. The tax is taking raises, and like you cannot expect to have a sustainable startup culture where that's the expectation the moment you sort of gain some sort of popularity and a substantial enough market share. So it's really demotivating in my opinion, and I feel like that government have to fix that.
I also think something that maybe we are not covering is the role of finance policies in our Africa, in the sense, like if you look at China, they are all over in Kenya and they are doing all these things, and these things require a lot of money. But what happens is that they have Chinese banks who loan them the money so that they can do all these jobs and maybe later on refund. And it's very hard for maybe any financial body in Kenya to do that for a Kenyan company. They don't do that. So I think it also has something to do with the financial policies in Africa, in that they have now to start making financial policies that favor African investments.
So will that be because of unwillingness or inability? Because sometimes I think
lack of belief, honestly. Like, Africans are capable. I don't know who it was who told us about developers from Africa in foreign countries. I can't remember who exactly said this, but they specifically pointed out that you could notice the difference in their logic. Like, when we are smart, it's not a matter of like we are Africans or anything, but people with the money lacks confidence in us. And when the governments, for instance, observe this, who are they supposed to favor? Of course, they'll favor the people with the money, who is not us. And then you find like now the policies will start being driven against our favor, regardless of whether you expect the government to support us or not. At the end of the day, money wins. Money kicks the ass of logic every time of the day. So,
and unfortunately, a lot of rich people in Africa are politicians, and they're the ones who are involved in policy making decisions. And they're the ones who actually know these guys who maybe have resources. Maybe they know the CEO, or, so interests, systems in Africa. And I'm sure there's a Kenyan who wanted to start an e-commerce platform to, sell stuff. But due to as Levi has said, the financial policies, the people who are actually in power, who are supposed to allow, no, I don't like using the word allow, but those ones who are in place to facilitate the infrastructure to actually be built so that entrepreneurs and people who actually have ideas which are African, but systems in Africa are just not set up to allow the African to succeed.
Yeah, like African startups, it will take a while before they happen. Even if you start off as an African startup, believe me or not, the moment you become big enough, you'll have to become a startup in Africa. You'll have to take your banking elsewhere. You'll have to take your development elsewhere. Your servers will have to go elsewhere. You'll have to take everything else elsewhere. And like Africa will just be receiving API requests, manze.
Unfortunately, one of the industries that's not well advanced in Africa or Kenya is the manufacturing industry. And this is where we can actually make or break. I don't know what actually the word to use, but with the manufacturing industry, we can create our own products, made in Kenya. We can have our own made in Kenya, made in Africa, but we just like buying maize all across the oceans, and we can actually grow maize, but
there's something Victor has mentioned about the startup in Africa, African startup becoming a startup in Africa. So my question is, do you think there are ways we can facilitate capacity building in terms of, let's say, the skills, filling the skills gap and technical gaps required to make sure that such things, to mitigate such things from happening?
You remember, if you haven't listened to our previous podcast, we had it's called Moringa School Podcast, and we spoke to one of the young Kenyans who came back to this country, and she started a recruiting company, and she's recruiting guys from abroad who have advanced technical skills, and by advanced I mean like the skills that they're called unicorns, right? So like our education system does not facilitate this, because most of the especially engineering programs are more theoretical, and as Victor has said, you're writing a computer code on a piece of paper and you can't even see your output. our education system needs to align with our needs as a nation in order to build capacity.
To answer your question, it's very difficult, honestly. Like the moment you hit scale, the factors that support scale are not available here.
Yep.
The internet connectivity, for starters, it's not enough to sustain servers that can run a company like Jumia. See, like it's too big to be riding on internet. Internet that has come over the oceans. It can fail any day, any minute. And even skills, like we said, like our campuses do not support engineering, and the people that we have here for software, they are developers mostly. They are not engineers, because engineering requires that fundamental understanding, which is not, again, provided by our education system. So you have to outsource engineering. Now, you've already outsourced the two main components of a tech startup in Africa. Then it's no longer a startup in Africa. It's no longer an African startup. It's a startup in Africa. Right? Scaling is very difficult for them to maintain the status.
I also think there is this, I don't know, maybe let me say negative perspective about Africans beyond Africa, whereby if you ask maybe 20 out of maybe 20 people from other continents what they think of Africa, they maybe talk of the things that the media has always been showing, maybe poverty, war, and corruption.
And
they don't show you that Africans are creative, Africans are developing solutions. They just show you that Africans are consumers to solutions that you have developed here. That is why I think even the commodities that are in Africa, that they are tailored just to be consumed and not anything else. For example, that is why Jumia operates in Africa but have offices out of Africa. That is why they are in the New York Stock Exchange and not in the Nairobi Stock Exchange, because they are building commodities, even if they are consumed by Africa, but they're building this stuff for non-African people, which I think is really a problem that maybe the government or maybe even the African Union can address. Let's show these people other aspects, and how can we do that? By African Union coming out and supporting African startups. Kenyan governments or African governments supporting their own and actually helping them out, as opposed to what they are currently doing, which is trying to get money from them. I think that would help bridge the gap between African startups and startups in Africa.
Interesting.
It's a food for that. So like you have to ponder on it for a time. Like, what's going on?
How to digest that. But also thinking, because entities are not necessarily driven by altruistic reasons. So the main goal is not to, they normally say to make life better, but making life better for you is contingent on them making money. So from even the most logical point of view, I will not be surprised that they will resort to such, because if it's not in their interest to do so, and if it will just compound the inefficiencies if they were to either to promote their presence in Africa in order to either capacity build or make things better for Africans. They will not do it, because eventually the main goal is to capitalize on the existing situation, optimize the ability to make profit, and especially because they're not going to pay something like Jumia is not, they're not going to pay dividend. They said that in the foreseeable future. So the only way the investors can make a return on the investment is share appreciation. Yeah. So the only way that investor who bought shares on the NYC or wherever, this is maybe some hedge fund manager or an asset manager who just sees this as a portfolio an asset in their portfolio. Sorry. So what they do is they look at its ability to generate long-term returns. If it's not in dividend, it's in the form of share appreciation. So if Jumia do something that will seem to compromise that or will dampen the ability to optimize that, they will dump the stock and the price will tumble. So and then the aspect of, in as much as we always want government and the institutions to help us or create conditions to make circumstances better, I also feel that we as the people who are in this continent and in this country must also play a role, because the market also dictates what a company or an entity operating in a certain space will do. And sometimes the government intervention might seem the most ideal thing, but it may have unintended consequences, or it might just be, say, heterogenic. It leads to unexpected harm, or it may not work the way it does. So that's probably something one can think about.
Wow. And guys, this week the first ever picture of a black hole was released by NASA, and it was breathtaking in my opinion. As a scientist and coming from a science background, I think this is really great. Something that started as a theory in someone's mind is actually proved physically. What do you guys think?
For me, the thing that I found really interesting and actually astounding was the size of the data of the images it took to create that image. Yeah. So I really found that if you look at the image they shared on Instagram, all those hard disks that they had, they said that if all that data there, if it were printed on pages, it would print 1 billion books. Yeah.
Wow.
So that's a lot. So if you try to imagine the level of magnitude of that data, and also from like a technical point of view, the processing power it took to really go through that and merge all those images together and come up with that image, I think it's astounding. I can just say it's astounding to me. Yeah.
Do you think sometimes that's the beauty of combining science and art? Because you'll find even in a place like Kenya, photographers to some extent are discredited. It's not a serious career.
Yeah.
But just looking at that sort of extent to where creativity and science, it's like the most amazing thing ever to know that, it's not just one or the other. You can actually be an astronomer and work on things that you love, but things that are very logical and abstract as well. I think that's what I took from that discovery.
Interesting.
Maybe something else that I took from this discovery was the power of the human mind and collaboration, in that this was data taken for several years by different people that was all leading to this moment. So as I am really a person who believes in the power of people, and this is just an epitome of whatever the power of people, what people can do when they come together, factoring in the challenges that are involved in getting this image into focus as they did, because this is something that defies all physics, all laws of physics. This is something that is beyond physics, yet people sat down, came together and made this happen. That is huge. And also it revives this notion whereby people say that inventions are lost with the death of Steve Hawking. No, inventions are not lost. We just fast confirming what they did and going beyond that. So I think it's, as a scientist, it's really interesting times. There are really great times ahead. The confirmation that black holes exist opens our world to new theories, and the black hole started as a theory and it was confirmed. So maybe new theories that can come up, they can help us understand the universe that we live in, and maybe answer the long life question that where are we alone on this universe or not.
So maybe you can explain to a listener who doesn't know what a black hole is after mumbling.
Bukat, you need be willing to come here and explain this. You're a subject matter expert in black holes.
In your own words.
Bukat is a friend of the show.
Yeah, so if you're out there and you don't know what a black hole is, just Google.
From the Google definition, a black hole is a region of space-time exhibiting such strong gravitational effects that nothing, not even particles and electromagnetic radiation, such as light, can escape from inside it.
In English.
So basically, the gravitational pull inside a black hole is so strong that it pulls even light. So you can't see anything, because the gravity, the physicist, you can explain
to see something, light has to come back to your eyes.
But
a black hole sucks all the light.
Exactly.
Nothing can come back, so you can't see it. You'll just see a
its
black
effect.
hole.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
just see its effect,
effect,
around
yeah.
it, and
Yeah.
you cannot actually just view it, which makes the photograph even much more
It was like, yeah.
like
It is
It
technically
reflects-
impossible to
awesome.
photograph
Yeah.
a black
Yeah.
hole. Yeah.
it's
Actually,
really
the most
mind-boggling.
fascinating thing about this was how accurate scientists were in creating an imagination of what a black hole is. Because all these years, I thought like someone had seen it before somewhere, only to realize they were all just imaginations. And when the actual photo was taken, it's eerily accurate. So yeah, it was quite fascinating about the human ability to imagine something based on several strings of facts and like create this visual imagination thing. I don't know. It was quite fascinating to me.
Thank you.
I also think maybe this is for those people, conspiracy theories out there. There will be now so many more conspiracies out of this.
Like?
For example, a very good conspiracy is the conspiracy whereby if you go through a black hole, there's a chance that there's another whole universe inside it, but you can't get it through because of the infinite gravity. So I mean, it opens up much more possibilities, which is, as a scientist, that is what we live for, the possibility that something is out there and us given the task of finding it. I mean, wow, great times are ahead.
I think it also goes back to trying to build something or research on something that's also beyond your time on this earth. Like these theories were theorized, I guess, by scientists who are no longer here, most of them. But the fact that lives on, it's also a very good, I think just, you have to leave a legacy.
And motivate people to take up on hobbies that can leave legacy, as you put it.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, our first priority has to make that money. And then pursue these inventions that are like, yes, they have an impact in society, but they are primarily, as in the initial invention is more of a wow factor. And then you realize, like, what does this actually mean?
But I think maybe the biggest lesson is not to be driven by money.
Yes.
Because as you've said, the aim is to make money. No, it's not. It's really not, according to my opinion. But just, there's more out there.
What actually I find interesting is, like, now that we can photograph a black hole 500 million trillion years away, that opens possibilities to just the reach that we can actually see with factual data. We can now be able to like observe planets and take pictures using this technology and have facts on what lies beyond Earth.
Yeah.
To this point, it's just ideation. Like the telescopes, they look and they'll see a planet and they'll see the air around it, the color, how it reflects light, and they can say like it reflects like the source, so it must have atmosphere with this density. So that means that maybe there's oxygen, there's nitrogen, like there's clouds, probably there's water. Like initially it's just theories and idealizing based on how light travels around the planet. Actually, that's basically how they determine if a planet is what is on a planet based on how light functions. But now we can take pictures, and that just opens up a new world to new discoveries. Hey, we might just take a picture of a green dude on this yeah.
Interesting.
Okay, guys, I think that we can wrap this up. Or Eugene, you have a point?
No, it's just I was looking at my phone, then I remembered something interesting I saw. It was a quote by this poet called Rumi. So just thinking, it reminded me about the events that have unfolded either locally and around the world. So it says, out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there is a field. I'll meet you there. So it just made me think of either the events that happened either locally, either people being killed in ways that, and a lot of context behind it, or the things about Julian Assange and stuff like that. There's a lot of story in the background, so it reminded me about that.
Okay,
Yeah, that's
so I think that if any of our listeners has any conspiracy theories on the black hole, there's another universe existing, I think we're open to, sharing these ideas.
Drop a line.
I found Victor and Eugene and Levi having this conversation. It was quite interesting. So I think even me for myself, I'll go figure out what this black hole, strange event is, as 2019 is. Yeah, so thank you guys for listening. Please leave a comment, please share with a friend, and we hope to see you guys next week. So thank you guys. Bye.
Peace out.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.